everyone, and it's my real pleasure as Vice-Chancellor to formally introduce the new research themes to DMU staff, and I hope that we'll be able to have a formal launch both for internal and external audiences face-to-face sometime later in the spring. Now, when I joined DMU a year ago, I was really delighted to see that planning to create a series of interdisciplinary research themes was already well underway. And why was I delighted? Because I'd spent the previous 12 months at Royal Holloway with my Senior Vice Principal for Research hat on, leading similar work, and I'd set up 4 research catalysts there just before I'd left. So why is the establishment of this new way of approaching research the right thing to do? To answer that, it's worth briefly mentioning the key thought and policy leadership developments which led me to that belief. And central to these is David Willett's 2019 policy piece, The Road to 2.4%, Transforming Britain's Research and Development Performance. In that, he notes that there's currently a once-in-a-generation opportunity for science and research, given that all parties are aligned at the moment and believe that there should be increased investment in research in order to stimulate the economy. Now, just to be clear, within the paper, Willett advocates for a broad-based research, and therefore his use of the term science here aligns more with the European Research Council's use, whereby the French term doesn't relate to the discipline of science, but to savoir-faire or knowledge or art and skill, as Collins Dictionary translates it. So Willett argues, alongside broad-based research, for the establishment of clusters where universities and businesses can come together. And it's this proclivity for clusters and networks which follows the influential ideas of University of Manchester's Richard Jones, whose research emphasises the need to level up through establishing networks across a region. So this push towards research clusters has coincided with a focus on interdisciplinary research, which was set out in the Paul Nurse Review of 2015 and in the British Academy in 2016 in a paper, and has really been exemplified in the challenge-based research adopted by UCL and others in its Grand Challenge approach, where it brings together teams of researchers from different disciplines to address the world problems in new ways. If the use of interdisciplinary research clusters or IDR clusters is the right way to go, then the second question is surely, how do you make them work? So the 2016 paper by Technopolis and the Sussex Policy Research Group attempts to answer this in its paper, Landscape Review of Interdisciplinary Research in the UK. And this paper identifies 4 incentives that are driving more IDR work. The pursuit of knowledge, wanting to know more and more in different ways. Academic quality, so the way in which quality research could be brought together by IDR. Impact, so the chance that IDR has to impact and have application. And also the availability of funding. Alongside that, the paper sets 5 barriers to such research: lack of collaboration, discipline-orientated cultures, career barriers, which means that often the kind of mono approach to disciplines is promoted rather than across interdisciplinary work. The time taken that it takes to produce outputs for IDR work, which it seems as being longer than necessarily mono discipline work. And ironically, the 5th barrier is funding, which, given it was also one of the things that was supporting it. But it concludes that what's helped overcome those particular barriers were 3 things. So IDR training for scholars, particularly giving leadership to those areas, and also institutional support. And so I'm pleased today, obviously, what we're doing is weighing in with our institutional support and supporting the new leaders of our research themes. So those findings are supported by the King's College London Policy Institute's 2015 paper, Characteristics of a High-Performing Research Unit, in which it notes that excellent units are marked by having the best of staff with training and mentorship programmes within that unit, strong social and ethical values behind the unit, leaders with accountability and autonomy who enable an organic collaboration and effective strategies. So that brings us to today. The launch of the new research themes is important because it allows us not only to showcase the important research that we've been undertaking in the last few years, but more importantly, provides a structure through which to catapult our current research into greater momentum. And the themes are not exclusive. Alongside their work sits the broad-based research of other lone scholars and research centres at DMU. But the themes, peace, equality and social justice, net zero, living in a digital society, lifelong well-being, and creative and heritage industries, have underpinned our major research achievements over the last 3 years. And we can see how all of these themes reflect our commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and to the value and contemporary challenge-led research. The themes have been introduced to reflect our current research strengths, our mission as the empowering university, and to put our values at the forefront of our research, and to break down barriers between disciplines and faculties to enable interdisciplinary collaborations and new ways of thinking. So we aim to recognise these themes more prominently and to provide an environment which breaks down boundaries so that DMU research can flourish even more in order to make a significant impact on the global stage. The theme directors are here to introduce themselves, to call attention to research in their respective themes, and to provide their visions for the future. Our PVC research professor, Heather McLaughlin, is leading on this new interdisciplinary platform for research, and she'll introduce our theme directors, who will follow with a Q&A session on how we can strengthen our research in these themes, and as I've indicated, combine DMU's recent research with our values. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm going to hand over to Heather.
Thanks very much, Katie, and welcome everyone to this launch of the research themes. And I know we've got more than 275 colleagues who've signed up for today. So that just is a demonstration of the interest in our themes and how we're going to progress them. And I think we've already got around 130 currently watching. So alongside the themes, we've got a website which we are going to be launching. That just gives you a little bit of a flavour of the website. So each theme will have a click on part of the website and some imagery. So this is still work in progress. And we are also drawing together a brochure for all the themes, so that we hope that will be available over the next week or so. So it's my pleasure, as Katie said, to introduce the theme directors in turn, and each will speak for around 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. So starting with peace, equality and social justice, Kenneth Morrison is Professor of Modern Southeast European History. He's the author of 6 books, largely focusing on modern history and politics of the Western Balkans. And in addition to his academic work, Kenneth was a specialist advisor for the House of Lords International Relations Committee for their UK and the Future of the Western Balkans inquiry, and has extensive experience of advisory work for organisations such as the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. He is currently working on an AHRC-funded project that aims to create a network of peace museums and sites of memory that deal with post-conflict legacies, and will publish his new book, War Hotels, which focuses on the role and function of hotels in the context of urban conflicts, and that's coming out in April 22. Over to you, Kenneth.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Heather, and thank you to Katie also for giving us the kind of broader context of why it's necessary to introduce the themes. It's really nice to see so many colleagues here. I know that there are about 130 of you currently watching. I think about over 200 signed up to see this, and you'll be able, of course, to see it on the DMU's YouTube channel as well. Many of you will know me anyway. I'm a professor of history here, as Heather said. I'm the theme director for peace, equality and social justice. And I want to spend 4 or 5 minutes with you today just explaining the theme and explaining the broader parameters of the theme, as well as discussing some of the sub-themes that I've created. And it will help you as scholars get a very good understanding of what those parameters are. So if I could have the first slide up, if we can just go to the next one. So this will give you, I'm going to have to get my glasses on to see this properly. Peace, equality and social justice So this theme incorporates a number of the fundamental changes, the grand challenges, if you like, that we face, and that's the case both domestically and internationally. Now, of course, those challenges, particularly in the post-pandemic world, are complicated, they're complex, they're myriad, but they really should be at the very heart of what we as a scholarly community are trying to engage with. We need to endeavour to engage with these great challenges. Now, one of the things about peace, equality and social justice is that it aligns very neatly with UN SDG 16, which is peace, justice and strong institutions. And of course, you'll know that we are the UN Global Educational Hub for that. So this theme, and myself as theme director, will work very closely with the SDG 16 team here at DMU, because many of the core objectives within SDG 16, in fact, are reflected in the broader theme as well. So the theme itself has been broadly defined. I've spent quite a bit of time over the past few months kind of mapping out different disciplines that could kind of align with the theme. And I've come up with a number of sub-themes that I think might be interesting to you. And also, I've looked at some of the research taking place at DMU across all 4 faculties. Now, these sub-themes are not exhaustive. And of course, this is a work in progress as well. So as the theme develops, we'll be able to incorporate perhaps some other sub-themes as we go forward. So the sub-themes as they stand at the moment are trust, social cohesion and stable communities, peace building, reducing violence, conflict mitigation and building sustainable societies. Of course, tackling gender and racial inequalities. DMU is very well known for not just decolonising DMU, but of course the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre, which I envisage will play a significant role. Promoting freedom in the media and a strong civil society. Protecting children, women and refugees from exploitation. The rule of law, justice and equal access to that justice. Also equal access to education, educational opportunities and democratic participation. Combating national and transnational organised crime, financial crime and corruption. Developing and consolidating strong, accountable and transparent institutions and strong democratic and inclusive political systems. And of course, inclusive growth and promoting kind of equality in terms of economic development. So these are the kind of basic sub-themes, the basic parameters that we mapped out at the very beginning to give you a sense of where your research might align to a particular theme. Now, of course, your research may well align to more than one theme, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what peace, equality and social justice theme is all about, what the broader parameters are, and how you might be able to engage with it. Now, of course, I'm very happy to take any questions there might be in the chat, but also to discuss individually with you how your own work and your own research might best align with the theme. So thank you very much. I know that was short. We have 4 or 5 minutes, but I'll now pass over to the next speaker, which I believe is Gabriel. I might be wrong.
No, it's actually Raghav, so I'll introduce Raghav. But thanks very much, Kenneth, and thanks for raising that issue about sub-themes, because I think it's an important point for people to remember that, you know, the themes are quite broad, and we can generate a number of sub-themes, and people will be able to align with those. So next we have Raghav, and Raghav is Professor of Mental Health and Theme Director for Lifelong Wellbeing. His background is in health psychology and nursing, and his work focuses on mental health, wellbeing and resilience, cultural diversity, participatory research and co-production, and he's the director of the Mary Seacole Research Centre. He's also co-director of Leicester Centre for Mental Health Research, a collaborative research centre with DMU, Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust and the University of Leicester. He has a portfolio of prestigious externally funded projects and published widely with over 130 publications on mental health, disability and health inequalities of diverse cultural communities. So over to you, Raghav.
Thank you, Heather. Right, it's great great to be here to actually introduce the theme of health and lifelong well-being as a research theme in DMU. So I'll take you through the theme focus and where we are actually going to go in about 2 to 3 years' time in terms of the development. First of all, well-being. Well-being is not about just not actually having illness. It is actually about a successful life with or without illness or conditions. So lifelong well-being, this is an overarching research theme promoting interdisciplinary research across all the faculties and researchers at DMU. So well-being is about feeling good and functioning well and comprises an individual's experience of their life and a comparison of life circumstances, its social, cultural norms and values. And we promote lifelong wellness in all our health and social care policies, and it's actually achieved by a healthy balance of physical, mental, cultural, and social health. So with that as a background in relation to what we're doing, what is the vision? The vision that we have in promoting lifelong well-being research is to facilitate and develop transformative interdisciplinary research on lifelong health and well-being across the 4 faculties, and that includes all the research centers and research institutes, by building on our research expertise with regional, national, and international collaborations. So we will do that by strategically capitalizing on our strengths and proactively planning for capacity building, for large grant applications for research funding calls, and successful grant capture, and also the knowledge co-creation in the wider sense of co-production on co-creating knowledge through research. As the previous speaker mentioned in terms about the various themes, overarching themes that we actually have, we look at mental health, creativity and well-being and resilience. We're looking at ethnicity, race and health, and digital technologies and health, and pharmaceutical innovations in practice, healthy active aging, gender and health, addressing health inequalities, global health challenges, and post-COVID recovery. This is not an exhaustive list of things, but I think this is an indicative stuff. Obviously, we are hoping to actually move forward with the discussions and how this could be shaped up in line with our research portfolios and research development agendas. So, put everybody's all the 5 research themes here, because without well-being, without a successful life and well-being, it is very difficult to promote any of these things. So it is actually with that in focus that I actually focus on the innovative interdisciplinary research that involves other themes, net zero, innovations in digital technology, in arts and cultural heritage, and more importantly, how we promote peace, social justice, and equality. So it is important that we actually work collaboratively with all the research teams and also with the individual research interests that one may actually have with colleagues within DMU and also outside DMU. So how can we promote this interdisciplinary research exchange and research development within lifelong well-being? And I think you need to look at new possibilities and have to focus on making some of those new ideas generate new research capacity and new knowledge. And also, what I would normally say, you need to make the impossible possible through focal collaboration. I believe that we need to look at new possibilities and explore new ideas. As Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. I think with that in view, the lifelong well-being research theme will look at collaborative research in creativity and also in how we shape up the well-being of the UK and also well-being internationally, and the narrative stories around it, the good aspects of it, the cultural knowledge of it, and how the various technologies actually help in that process. So over the next few months and years, I'll be looking at talking to quite a number of the research teams and research directors in planning how we move forward so that we can actually have a vibrant, critical mass of research on lifelong well-being at DMU. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Raghu, and also for highlighting how all the themes can fit together and the need to be collaborative with all that we're doing. So next we have Gabriel. Gabriel Egan is Professor of Shakespeare Studies and Theme Director for Living in a Digital Society and Director of the Centre for Textual Studies and Director of the English Research Institute. He's one of the general editors of the recently published New Oxford Shakespeare Complete Works, which used computational methods to make new discoveries about just what Shakespeare did and didn't write. Gabriel co-edits the journal Theatre Notebook for the Society for Theatre Research and is currently co-authoring a book on the light that computational analysis can throw on the differing early printed editions of Shakespeare's plays. He's also collaborating with Professor Justin Smith in the Leicester Media School on an AHRC-funded project about the 1994 BBC TV adaptation of George Eliot's novel Middlemarch. Over to you, Gabriel. Can you unmute?
I'll start that again.
Okay.
Thank you. From the top. Colleagues, I think we can safely agree that the future of our society is going to be more digital than its past. The theme of living in a digital society is concerned with the recent past as well as the future. The last 20 years have seen technological changes whose effects on living and on society have yet to be fully studied by sociologists, and they might well be revolutionary. Knowing where we have just been will help us better to see where we are going. The word digital conjures up images of computers and data processing, but it comes from the Latin digitus, meaning finger. These are our digits. We count with them. They give us our 10-based numbering system, and we point things out with them. Hence the cognate Latin word dictus, giving us indicate, dictate, and dictionary. The digital comes from the living body and returns to the living body in medical interventions enabled by all-pervasive digital technologies. Wherever the digital meets an existing specialism, in medicine, in law and crime prevention, in architecture, public planning, manufacture, or the creative industries, the result is usually a lowering of costs that makes possible the previously unimaginable, the previously impossible. It's often difficult for researchers confined to one field to see the opportunities for such transformations. It takes two or more researchers from different fields coming together to spot a hitherto overlooked opportunity. Like the other research themes, living in a digital society will bring together collaborating researchers for just this reason. Examples of happy interactions across the disciplines are legion. Live theatrical and musical performance directed to an audience sitting in the same room ceased with the COVID pandemic. But there are other ways to be live, and collaborations between performers and technologists have generated modes of performance mediated digitally and taking place in the virtual worlds of computers. It has been questioned whether we should invest as much time and money in research about the arts and culture as we do about research regarding medicine, manufacturing, designing smart cities, or transport infrastructures, those areas that most obviously and most directly improves people's lives. The literary scholar Jonathan Bate gave, I think, the best response to this instrumentalist question. Progress in medicine, Bate remarked, might give you 10 more years of healthy life, but only the arts and culture can make those 10 extra years worth having in the first place. The digital, in all its forms, takes place in a social context. If I could have the first slide, please. About half of humankind has an internet connection, and so can study Michelangelo's remarkable creation of Adam, painted in 1512, available from Wikipedia. It was another 250 years before Luigi Galvani discovered that electricity animates the body. Yet Michelangelo seems to show life jumping as a spark from God's digit to Adam's digit. Indeed, many adaptations of this picture draw in the spark, as here from the title sequence of the television program The South Bank Show. It is electricity, silicon semiconductors, and worldwide network cables that enable this image to travel the world. Yet it is not technology, but a social agreement, the Berne Convention on Copyright, that enables Wikipedia to make such images available to all, having successfully defeated the museums and galleries that shamefully tried to prevent their free public dissemination. So, with equal stress on all three parts of its name, living, digital, and society, this research theme will seek to promote the best that the digital future holds for us all. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Gabriel. Very, very interesting indeed, unpicking the different components there. Next, we're moving on to creative and heritage industries, and we have co-directors here, Justin Smith and Rachel Granger. So first, Justin Smith, he's Professor of Cinema and Television History and Director of the Cinema and Television History Institute. He's also a visiting Professor of Media Industries at the University of Portsmouth. He's the author of a number of books and articles on post-war British film and television history and popular music. He was Principal Investigator on the AHRC-funded projects Channel 4 and British Film Culture and 50 Years of British Music Video. He's currently PI on the AHRC project Transforming Middlemarch, based in DMU Centre for Adaptations. Rachel Granger is Professor of Urban Economies. Her research and teaching interests are directed towards normative and practice-based issues of creative cities in advanced societies, smart and experimental governance, and inclusive growth. Rachel is currently conducting research on the 6 models of creative industries, creative life cycles, and design as a major growth pole. A second principal area of work concerns processes and implications of transformative change in creative cities. Rachel is Site Director of the AHRC Midlands for Cities programme and co-lead on the Economy and Business stream of the Leicester Civic University Agreement. Her recent publications are in Value Construction in the Creative Economy, Design Culture in the City, Creative Splintering and the Evolution of Culture as Civic Innovation. Rachel also leads on the Leicester Urban Innovation Lab. Over to you, Justin and Rachel.
I'll go first. Thank you, Heather, for that. The starting point for this research theme is in recognising DMU's existing excellence in visual and performing arts, humanities, design, media, and creative technologies, some of which is reflected in the visuals that we're using today. Also, to acknowledge DMU's growing reputation for practice research and its creative leadership, which is used in a variety of industry and community settings. I think building on this excellence and reputation, if we go to the next slide, but also looking towards growth potential, we see the strategic aims of this research theme as being to build practice research in its different formats, and that includes co- and recreative research techniques, and to build enterprise into this. I think secondly, to acknowledge that not all areas of creative and heritage industries are inclusive, and to build pathways to empowerment that address those barriers. We also want to build DMU's identity and to develop to its full potential its national and international profile and leadership. We want for DMU to be truly a university of choice for all creative and heritage research and are committed to building that. We'd like to extend our civic partnership work to use our creative and heritage leadership for local and regional growth and in levelling up. Justin and I and others are also committed to building researcher capacity, and specifically to scale early and mid-researcher capability into nationally leading research and partnerships. We want to provide a pathway for growth for researchers at DMU. And finally, we want to build and invest in next generation research in creative and heritage industries. We want to sustain excellence and leadership over coming years. I'm now going to pass to Justin, who has the task of outlining what our priorities for action are and what we plan by way of activities for the remainder of this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. So how are we going to put these priorities into action? We're beginning early doors by reaching out to the research centre and institute directors to open conversations about the existing strengths within our institutes and centres and ways in which we can bring value to the work that's currently underway. But secondly, to work more closely also with national partners, initially with Creative UK, of which we've gained membership, formerly the Creative Industries Federation, of course. So their education and skills offer will be of benefit to all DMU staff and students. But in the coming months, we'll also be working with the likes of the Design Council, with the RSA, with other appropriate partners in the third sector, supporting our wider research efforts. Thirdly, we're going to work to scale capacities in areas of existing and emerging strength and help reinforce the identity and profile of the good work that's going on externally. And some of that will be with centres and institutes, and some working with those of you who've already had successful large-scale bids. Fourth, to develop more capacity through pipeline opportunities and working for next generation researchers, working with early and mid-career researchers and horizon scanning for opportunities that enable us to move as researchers from those small individual bids to upscale to major bids with partners externally, nationally and internationally. And finally, is to look at the opportunities that there may be for working in an interdisciplinary way to join our conversations together within DMU and with our existing external partners and apply them to new funding opportunities that may offer great potential to engage with and address real world problems. So our immediate timeline for action is to launch very shortly a Creative and Heritage Industries Fund, which offers some pump priming funding to help stimulate a range of different kinds of work. There'll be more information coming out on that very shortly. To engage with Leicester's cultural plan, and we're already talking to our partners in the Civic Universities Agreement about the potential for working locally with partners in the city and the region, and to launch Leicester's Creative Exposition Group, moving ahead to the conference in the summer, where we hope to showcase the work that's emerging. Into next month, we're going to launch a DMU Heritage Forum to partner the existing practice-based research forum that exists, that covers both aspects of the creative and heritage sub-themes, and to work with those who are recipients of the first wave of new research funding towards our events in the summer. So we're looking forward to working with you across the board in ways in which we can develop our existing research and new opportunities moving forward. And we've got a Twitter handle at DMU Creates that we're going to be using increasingly. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rachel and Justin, and you've even got a Twitter handle. That's very impressive already, and thanks for setting out your priorities and your timeline for action. It really looks like you've got a head start on that already. We've got one more theme to go, so please start thinking about your questions and put them in the comments there. So last but by no means least, we've got net zero. And I'm pleased to introduce Subhesh Bhattacharya, who's Professor of Energy Economics and Policy and Director of the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development. He's an internationally renowned energy specialist working on global energy environment issues for more than 30 years. He specialises in multidisciplinary applied energy research covering engineering, economic, regulatory and environmental perspectives. He's also Editor-in-Chief of Energy for Sustainable Development. Over to you, Subhesh.
Okay, this theme relates to the global threat of climate change. So, yeah, the first slide. So this is net zero, which is about, most of you perhaps would be knowing about this, the climate emergency and the global agreement to limit the temperature rise well within 2 degrees from the above pre-industrial temperature level. That has led to these pledges by international community for achieving net zero emissions by a certain target date. Often this is being 2050, but some countries are moving a little bit further, 2060 as well. So this research theme is directly related to the global ambition, this global ambition of achieving net zero, and is aimed at supporting the local, national, and global actions to achieve those targets. As we have seen that most of the countries are still dependent on and locked in to a carbon dependent economic development pathway. And as a result, our carbon emissions are still increasing. So that's this first diagram on the left side is showing. And if we have to achieve a net zero, our business as usual scenario won't lead there. So what we have to achieve is something very dramatic that we have to aim for. There was a GIF here which is not showing up, but this pathway, the business as usual pathway, will have to kind of be changed in a significant way so that the diagram reaches almost zero here in this bottom part. So that would require a significant amount of interaction and innovation and changes, which would lead to the near zero emissions by a target date of 2050. Now, this kind of a challenge, because this is a short period of time within which we have to achieve this target, and that is an experiment which is unprecedented. And that's why this opens up opportunities for wide range of research, and this would lead to challenges, but it is a time that research universities like DMU are taking opportunities and seizing these opportunities. Now, this diagram is showing number of areas where climate actions and research potentials exist. And many of these areas are already where DMU is playing an important role. So the built environment, green homes, mobility, green mobility, electric vehicles, energy generation through renewable energies, power transmission, business, alternative ways of doing businesses, agricultural activities, and transforming the societal aspects so that all aspects of our life would be touched by this transition to a net zero activity. And this then directly is related to the global agenda of leaving no one behind. And that agenda also is then climate actions are supporting a number of them. So energy, transport, waste, green homes, green industries, nature-based services, they all relate to a number of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, 6, 7, 13 on water, energy, climate, jobs, infrastructure, cities, resource utilization, poverty, hunger, health, education. So 3 dimensions, economic, environment, and social, all these dimensions would be touched on. And this gives us an opportunity to align our climate actions to sustainable development goals as well, so that the prioritization of climate actions can also lead to co-creation and co-benefit generation as well. And this then offers the opportunity for further collaboration, interdisciplinary research activities, and impact directly the societal changes so that impactful research can be created. And this is what this theme is trying to achieve. It will facilitate the researchers within the university to work on various aspects of net zero, and allow them to bring their expertise and cooperation together. And it would also support collaboration with other universities, other research groups to develop this agenda further. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Sabesh, and a very important challenge for us of getting to net zero, and some really interesting linkages there with the SDGs. So thank you very much for that. So now it's over to you, and I understand that we've had a few questions coming up in the chat. So I think we're going to go to those questions first. Are we bringing the questions up? So I think there's one in the chat for Justin and Rachel about staying informed about their progress. So Justin and Rachel, do you want to? How do people stay informed about what's happening?
So thanks for that question. Aside from the Twitter feed that we mentioned earlier, we've set up a Teams group on Microsoft Teams for this theme, which links to a email list. Lots of colleagues with interest in our area, our theme, have already joined up to that list, and so we're going to keep you well informed about the progress of activities on our theme. We also, the risk of duplicating information, we're also going to work closely with faculty, research and innovation offices, and existing research distribution lists. So there's plenty of opportunities to find out what's going on and the progress of the theme. I don't know whether Rachel wanted to add anything.
No, I think, well, the only thing that I'd add to that is that we're communicating at lots of different levels, because we appreciate that creative and heritage is quite a diverse area. So in addition to what Justin has said, working with faculties, working with ADRs, for example, we're also communicating heavily with research centres and institutes, with industry, with people in the city, regionally, nationally, and some of that, we're going to capture through that Teams channel that Justin has just said, which is linked to SharePoint, some of it through Twitter, and some of it through the bespoke distribution email circulation list. And I think hopefully that will capture a lot, but please make sure you get in contact to make sure that we are capturing everything.
Okay, thank you very much. So they can email you, presumably, old-fashioned email if they want to.
We have old-fashioned email as well, Heather.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for that, Justin and Rachel. I think we've got some questions coming up for Kenneth. Yes, what practical steps are you suggesting to enhance research and collaborations about PSSJ and the media's role?
Okay, so I'll deal with all three questions at the same time because they're all in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's a very good one. The first major thing we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be running a large international conference in May. And that conference is going to be a joint kind of theme SDG 16 conference. So we're hoping to put together a number of panels, disciplinary panels, but those disciplinary panels, of course, will help us understand where there might be synergies between particular academics and their research projects. So at the moment, myself and Mark Charlton are organising what that conference will look like. It will take place over 2 days. The first day, there will be a series of panels. We're already in discussion with law, politics, the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre. I'd be very, very keen to have media and media discourse involved in giving a panel there as well, international relations and politics, and of course, history. So this is one great opportunity for us all, God willing, to be in the same room together, listening to each other's presentations, getting a sense of the kind of research that's being conducted across the university. Because one of the key challenges at the moment of the themes is to identify what it is that everyone does. And one of Lawrence's questions, actually a later question that others might address, is how do we best encourage academics to work in a kind of interdisciplinary manner? And I think one of the barriers in the past is that we've often operated in kind of disciplinary silos. So, you know, my big hope for the PESJ conference is that we can begin the process of breaking down those disciplinary silos. I'll have to just go back up to the second question. How can interested researchers see and get in touch with a network of colleagues working on the theme? So very much like the other theme directors, we identified through the SIA process which scholars align with which themes, or which scholars align with best with which themes. Some, of course, align with more than one, but there is going to be a kind of dedicated email created. I think it's going to be created in the next couple of days. So you'll receive information about the theme initially through that email. I'm also hoping once I get a full list of those that are aligned to the theme, that we'll be able to put together a kind of large Teams meeting in which you know, I can have information about individual research projects or ideas about how to perhaps broaden the parameters of the theme from individual academics. The final question is what support will be available for active researchers in PESG, time, money, conferences and so forth. So the good news is that there will be funding available for the conference. So we're really looking to put on something quite special. So for each of the panels, we're also going to invite one external speaker as well, and there'll be a budget for you for your panel to bring in a kind of keynote speaker or an external speaker for your panel. So the funding is going to be concentrated primarily on the conference this year, but other theme directors have put together some funding for, you know, seed corn funding packages, and that's definitely something I'll be looking at as well in the future. But we felt that the best way to approach this year, the best way to use the budget, was to put together the UN SDG theme conference, which will take place in May, and which information about which will be with you very soon. So I hope that answers all your questions, Juliana.
Thanks very much, Kenneth, and it sounds great, and I think we're all craving a face-to-face event, so I'm sure it will be really well supported. We've got a question from Emma. Thanks, Emma. How would you advise a PhD student to become involved with these themes, contribute and undertake additional work and funding opportunities? Let's put that one to Gabriel first.
Thanks. Yes, Emma. Well, if the theme you're interested in is living in a digital society, then the thing to look out for is a couple of events I'm running in a few weeks' time. I'm calling them spotlight events, and they're opportunities for all the people who've expressed interest in some aspect of living in a digital society to meet for an hour and a half. One time it'll be done online virtually, and one time we'll do it face to face. And as Kenneth mentioned, there's money available. What I want to use the funding that I've got at my disposal for is to run these events as what we call sandpits, where people get to explore what they have in common with people from parts of the university they wouldn't normally be in contact with, because we're looking for these opportunities where it so happens that something going on in one faculty chimes with something in another, but people just don't run into each other. So we're organizing these events to bring people together to work in groups on the first ideas for an external funding bid. So to actually start to develop what we call a case for support, which is a statement of why this is something worth doing. And what will happen is in these 2 spotlight events, people will get a chance to work in groups on coming up with some original idea that may be worth pursuing, and then they can apply. It's quite a simple form. They'll apply to the theme itself for a pot of money to start working on that properly, that case for support, which may involve bringing people in from elsewhere outside the university. It may involve various kinds of events they want to run, but it's what they sometimes, as we've heard, pump priming and seed core money. It's to do with getting started on an idea that otherwise wouldn't happen. Because that's what I think a lot of the theme directors are thinking, is that we're looking for opportunities that the university wouldn't be able to exploit if we didn't have these themes. That's the rationale. It's to put people together to do things that otherwise it just wouldn't occur to them. Because we think there's a lot of missed opportunities in that area. So, Emma, that's how I think everyone's going to say the same thing about, you'll hear plenty from us about what's going on. So I think that's going to be in common. But the thing to do is to look out for activities you can actually engage with. And then it's lovely to hear you say you want to engage, because that's what we're hoping to hear. We're hoping these themes actually inspire people and think, yeah, my work's got a connection to that. I wonder what they're going to offer. And the fact that we can then actually offer support to develop these ideas, I think is terrifically exciting.
Great, thanks, Gabriel. And reaching out beyond what we normally do, I think, is a really important point there. Same question to Subhesh. PhD students getting involved with net zero, Subhesh.
Yeah, again, the main plan for engaging with the PhD students is that there will be some meeting opportunities. So as the theme director, I have been planning to reach out to all the PhD students who are interested and working in related areas, so that we can identify what kind of areas they perhaps would try to graduate afterwards, or how we can support them in terms of carrying out their work. So that's one area. And they can also participate in the sessions where we would be discussing about proposals, calls that are coming, and maybe giving some ideas for specific areas of training that might help in terms of building a common vocabulary, common interdisciplinary understanding of the issues. And this is what I was thinking in terms of engaging with different sections of the researchers. So net zero would be capturing businesses, technological aspects, social dimensions, environmental dimensions, economic dimensions, everything. And we need people from different areas to work and collaboratively on those projects. And the training programs would offer some sort of a platform for acquiring some of those essential skills there. So that's how I was also planning to engage with the PhD students.
Thanks, Subhesh. Any of the other theme directors like to come in on this, bringing in doctoral students? Raghu? I think you're on mute, Raghu.
Right. I think in addition to what's already been said by my colleagues, I think there is an opportunity for research students to be getting involved in all the kind of meetings and other workshops that are organized under the various themes, especially within the lifelong well-being theme as well. And I think most importantly, just taking the PhD forward in relation to how this might actually connect with, especially in my own theme about lifelong well-being, how we would actually connecting with that, and whether it could be translated into a further grant applications, small or big or whatever. And I think that is an opportunity to actually have discussions about PhD students, because I think we are in the business of actually creating new generation of researchers at DMU. And I think this is an opportunity for PhD students to actually get engaged in and to develop that research into more critical mass of research portfolios.
Great, thank you very much. And let's move on. We've got two people asking a similar question, and that's around how we're going to support researchers working across themes belonging to more than one theme. And that's something that Rafi's raised, and also Jonathan, mechanisms for effective cross-thematic working. Who would like to pick that up? How about you, Kenneth, first?
Well, it's a difficult question. I mean, I think that some of the themes, they do overlap with each other. So, for example, net zero or living in a digital society, both Subesh and myself and Gabriel and myself have discussed areas in which we might, work together. There are clearly aspects of living in a digital society, for example, that impact upon social justice, equality, peace, and so forth. So there's quite a bit of significant overlap between some of the themes. How are we going to support researchers working across the themes? I don't think it would be, for example, the seed corn funding. You don't necessarily have to, you might apply to one theme, but your work actually may incorporate aspects of two themes or even three themes. So you shouldn't necessarily think that you have to align to one particular theme. Your work doesn't have to align to a particular theme. It can align to 1, 2, 3, whatever. But I mean, this is something that as the themes evolve, that the theme directors themselves will have to discuss how we're going to kind of support researchers working across themes, or those that clearly belong to both. Gabriel, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to echo what Ken said, since we've all been talking about not working in silos, it would be bizarre if then the themes became the silos. So we already know that's not going to happen. I don't care which theme things ultimately happen in. We don't have to allocate things very precisely. We just need to get this kind of interdisciplinary work going where it's viable and where it's fundable.
Great, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to, there's a question there about, will there be scope for input from local non-profit organisations? Rachel, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think the short answer is yes. That might happen through the seed funding. It might happen through the working groups and new networks that form around subthemes. I think the key thing is here, and we're seeing this in a few questions, is I don't think we need to worry too much about working across themes or in and outside groups. I think let's not get too prescriptive about that. The key thing is about adding value, and the key thing is about the impact. I think that's what we're interested in, and that might happen across themes or within themes. That's the first thing. I think, as Justin and I set out in our theme, our strategic priorities are around adding value. It's around collaborating with others in the city, regionally and beyond. It's about thinking about things slightly differently in niche areas. And that's what we're particularly interested in. So the very short answer, Heather, is yes, there's going to be lots of scope for that. So please get involved and make contact with us.
Great, thanks very much, Rachel. Now, there's a lot of questions coming up about money, and I think people think that theme directors are sitting on pots of money, and I can assure you that they're not. So it's probably a good idea to sort of make the point that, clearly the university will continue to support researchers and their development through some mechanisms that already exist, and we're actually looking at those support mechanisms as well as sort of teasing out these themes. But I think the theme directors are not necessarily going to be dishing out money for researchers. That will come through researcher development. But I think that said, and I'm sure directors will want to come in on this, that the theme directors are very keen to support research and support early career and mid career researchers in whatever way they can. Justin, do you want to say anything on that?
Thanks, Heather. Yes, I think we ought to reassure colleagues that the budgets which the theme directors have are targeted at doing specific work that we can do across these themes, and are not envisaged in any way as a kind of replacement or alternative to the funding streams that research institutes and centres traditionally have, and go towards funding, for example, the kinds of things that Juliana mentions, conference attendance and so on and so forth. So we envisage that those local provisions within research centres and institutes will remain, and that our work will augment them.
Great, thank you very much, Justin. I think we have some other. I think we have some other questions coming through. Some that we came through earlier. Could we have some of those questions up? Oh, this is one for Raghu. Since feeling good and functioning well is fundamental to tackling any challenge, what research is planned in this area, Raghu?
Absolutely, I fully agree with that. And I think it's important. That's the reason why we need to collaborate between the teams as well. I think we have what is actually planned here. Obviously, there are a number of these the themes. This is need to be discussed wider with DMU colleagues who are actually coming under the lifelong well-being research team, who are actually aligned to that, who are actually interested in it. And I think also very much depends upon what the UKRI calls are that will be coming up in the near future. And also planning some of the things in relation to how people make meaning of well-being, and I think the kind of health inequalities in relation to well-being, because we live in Leicester and the neighbouring areas, the diverse cultural areas of the UK, and I think it's important that we look at the multiple perspectives, multiple narratives of how people create that well-being. And I think the DMU should be taking a lead on that in relation, not just in the well-being, but I think how, the digital media and how inequalities and how creative arts and other things may actually contribute to that process, or could be a methodology through which we could actually explore some of those perspectives. So I think the themes would actually emerge in terms of the areas that we want to try and focus on, because I think we don't want to leave it too broad. I think we need to be clearly focused on where we want to go and where, to a certain extent, where the money is, and also how we actually tap on that fund and capitalize, and also develop the capacity for our own research colleagues, including our local organizations, NGO, and also the national partners.
Thanks very much, Raghu. And there's a question there from Jane, which I think is a very good one. How will you measure the impact of the themes as opposed to that of the research institutes? Not everyone can claim successes as their own. And what I would say to you, Jane, is we're not in competition with one another. We're all on the same side here. So I think it's a question of how we can work collaboratively, and how the theme directors will work collaboratively with the centre directors. And I think that comes up with some of the other questions as well. So perhaps, Gabriel, do you want to talk about how you're going to work collaboratively with the centres?
Well, you're absolutely right. Sorry, I totally agree with the idea that we're not in competition here. And in fact, it's not even obvious how, if we were, we would divvy up the money, as it were, and say who's succeeded as whose themes have worked and whose hasn't, because they are so overlapping in many ways, as people have said. As for working with the current research centres and the current institutes, we need to have, I've started to have conversations. There need to be more conversations with the current post holders in those positions to see what people actually think are the missed opportunities, because that's the point. It's about the missed opportunities we want to capture. This is not throwing out all the things we've been doing and starting again. This is trying to find spaces where the university could quite readily exploit new opportunities that exist, if only we knew better about them. So it's a matter of communication with those centre directors, institute directors. And I've started having these meetings. And what I do notice is some quite interesting cultural differences across the university about the nature of research. There really are, people are interestingly different by discipline, how they think about possibilities. Some people are concerned, historians are by definition concerned with the past. Sociologists are often concerned with the very recent past and how has technology affected, how things changes in the last 20 years affected such things as social inequalities, but also access to opportunities people didn't have before. People over in the sciences tend to be quite a different mindset. They tend to be highly optimistic and always want to talk about the next technological development rather than reflecting upon the previous effects of previous developments. So one of the things I think I can do as a theme director is actually get a sense of the whole set of ideas, which are in some cases actually not so much personality driven, but driven by the way that disciplines shape people's attitudes towards research. And I think part of the isolation in various parts of the university that some people have felt, the sense of not being a cohesive whole, is that we haven't had people around who are talking to everybody in detail about aspects of their work and making these contrasts and comparisons that can be so fruitful. But also we need to make those exchanges very aware. We need to do this with great awareness of how different disciplines actually differ in their attitudes towards what we mean by knowledge creation. And it's getting those conversations going that I think is going to be beneficial. How many opportunities actually turn out to be, I think, is as of yet unknown. We're still scoping this area of work. And as for how we judge the overall success, some people will say, well, we'll count the money. That's a very obvious thing. I think we can do better. I think we need to do that because that actually affects the future opportunities we have. But I think we can also do better. And I think theme directors will be focused on the stories we can tell about the research, not just the actual money. Some of the most interesting stories, some of the most challenging ideas don't emerge from the multi-million-pound projects. They emerge from the slightly smaller. So part of the philosophy of this, as far as I'm concerned, is actually valuing research in itself, not in an instrumental way. And I brought up instrumentalism in my intro to the thing because I think it's very important. We can actually bring together a pragmatic concern with the fact that it costs money to do things with a sense that research itself is of itself a social good, irrespective of impacts, that knowledge creation is itself a good, and that we're not going to be driven by the crude mechanics of how an institution must run itself. We're going to also bear in mind those principles about the inherent value of people's research wherever we find it.
Yeah, I agree totally, Gabriel. It's not just about the money. The money is useful, of course, but it is about the impact and the impact of what we do, which we know is incredibly important and something that we need to monitor closely. But I think it is about bringing people and disciplines together, and that's really behind the research themes, bringing people together, I think, as Gabriel said earlier, who perhaps wouldn't normally speak to one another. And really scoping opportunities that we might not have looked at before, and I think that's really important. I think there's a question there around how the intersection with existing centres and institutes, and clearly there's lots of ways that the centres will intersect with the research themes, and again the theme directors will be having a dialogue with the centre and institute directors to really have a look at the opportunities and have a look at what can happen across the different centres. So I think these aren't kind of mutually exclusive things. It's about collaboration and how we can work together and see opportunities that weren't there before, and looking as well at our stakeholders and what our stakeholders are. The stakeholders involved in the various centres, and also around the various themes, and how we can bring those together and collaborate. And I think the other part of it is collaboration in a larger way, not just within DMU, but across our other our other partners internationally, and how we might bring those in more effectively. So lots of scope, and I think it's still in its early stages, and we do need to still tease out how it's going to work in the most effective way. Another question there about, for the theme leads, how do we create external as well as internal collaborations, especially for larger scale funding? And I think that's a really good question, Nikki. Let's pose that one to Kenneth.
Yeah, it is a very good question. And I mean, Nikki's absolutely right to identify this as it's all very well having, interdisciplinary work across the university, but if we're talking about big bids from research councils, we need to be thinking about our external partnerships. Other universities, it can be, charitable organizations, whatever. But we definitely need to be thinking about developing those networks. I mean, in terms of my own work as a theme director for peace, equality and social justice, I'm working with a number of external partners now, developing our relationships with them that might create the groundwork, the foundations for, at some stage, a large bid. So I'm working with partners at the HRC, working with a number of peace building organizations, conflict mitigation organizations. This is related to my own research, but in a sense, developing those external networks are going to be extremely important. Having said that, it is important to break down the barriers, to try and identify synergies within the university and work together on multi or cross-disciplinary research projects. But absolutely, our external partners are key, in the development of better external networks are key as well. And I'm sure others will have something to add to that.
Yeah. Anyone else want to come in on this particular question?
Yeah,
Rachel, and then Raghu.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Kenneth. You've absolutely nailed it. I think the key thing for creative and heritage is to use the funding that will be announced very shortly for seed funding, to think about that in a much more creative way. So think about what Katie said at the start about IDR clusters and adding value. And for us, we're very much interested. We're not about replacing the excellent communities of practice in existing centres or institutes. We're interested in applied research, new research, niche research. That helps us to grow our capability in line with growth potential. And that's where we can add value to the broader pot of research.
Great, thanks very much. Raghu.
Yeah, I agree with the previous speakers from Rachel and Kenneth in relation to this, their views. And I think there is also, in terms of how we move forward, there are I see there are three streams or three pathways in which we move forward in terms of building that research capacity. And I think there's a pathway of collaboration that's already been widely discussed. I think collaboration, not just within the institutes and centers within one faculty, but I think across the faculty is actually very important, and also across the themes and actually what is actually possible. And I think and also bringing in new possibilities as to how we create that dialogue to how some of those research areas could be addressed, rather than going for the traditional method. Look for ideas for thinking outside the box in terms of how that might be capable of actually attracting the research council's attention to actually funding those kind of things. I think that is very much important. And I think secondly, it is also important to actually have the intelligence in relation to what is going to come on board in relation to the funding and also how it is going to be planned. And I think so it's important that we work with institutes and centers in relation to planning that as to how, what some of those calls will be, what those themes might be coming together, what kind of teams might be coming together for that application from DMU and also national or international teams as well. And thirdly, there is also the need for responding some of those calls which might actually happen immediately. And I think it's important to actually look at opportunities and what the possibilities are there to actually put up something that is actually quite genuinely addressing the themes, addressing the need of our own locality or our own region or national context as well.
Thanks, Raghu. Comment from Jonathan Davis. I thought it was you. Is in favour of warp and weft. I think it's a really good point of how the themes and the centres and institutes may work together. I'm sure there'll be some comments on that, but it is a good point. anyone want to come in on that? Justin?
Yeah, I think I'll come in on that first. Jonathan, it's a great point, and you know, it's not the role. It's not our role as theme directors to be overly prescriptive. And what we really want to do as theme directors is to kind of help develop research from the grassroots. And of course, that's coming primarily from the research institutes and centres. So, you know, we're looking to have a kind of collaborative relationships with the centres and institutes. And yes, the institutes and centres should be thinking about creating thematic work. So it should be coming from below, if you like. We shouldn't be imposing this on you, and we don't have any intention of imposing it on you, but we're trying to encourage you to think about thematic work within the centres and research institutes. So I think, you know, that kind of thinking and, you know, developing perhaps your own projects would be extremely welcome.
Thanks, Kenneth. Justin?
Well, yes, I couldn't agree more with what Kenneth's just said. So there's little to add, except to say that to amplify that, you know, we fully recognise that, for example, in terms of collaborations and external partnerships, that existing research centres and institutes will have their own local connections. You know, they will have their own existing networks. They will have partners they've worked with in the past. It's about building on those, and sometimes it will be about identifying new funding opportunities that enable us to develop those partnerships further, to take a successful project and to look towards the next one, or to bringing in an additional partner. So, you know, I think it is very much about working with our existing strengths, as Kenneth has said, as well as identifying the potential of new opportunities.
I think the centres remain the sort of the engine of research development. I think the themes will facilitate and have a really good facilitation role in spotting opportunities that may not be otherwise obvious. So both can coexist very nicely. Not seeing any more questions coming through, and we've only got 10 minutes or so left, and I just wonder whether it's a good opportunity to finish off then, to perhaps ask all the theme directors to just have a sort of a minute of perhaps summing up. So let's start with Justin and Rachel. See how you manage with the double act on this.
Do you want to go first, Rachel?
No, you go first.
All right, I'll go first. Well, some thoughts about interdisciplinarity and some thoughts about creative partnerships. First of all, I think on the subject of interdisciplinarity, again, I would stress the point that I've just made, that you know, we're not inventing interdisciplinarity. There's plenty of examples across DMU of effective interdisciplinary working. And actually what we want to do is to tap into those, to talk to those colleagues who've been successful in those areas, and, you know, to unlock what makes for a successful interdisciplinary bid, and to learn from that knowledge and to apply it where else it may have potential. So that was my point about interdisciplinarity. I'll just say one more thing, which is about partnerships. In my experience, working with external partners depends upon two things. One is trust, and secondly, that trust to be based upon the mutual value that each partner has and derives from a collaboration. And quite often, in my experience, it's about identifying the research that needs doing according to that partner. And if we, as theme directors, can talk to potential external partners and to find out what value research can be to them, then we're on a sound footing for looking at ways in which you know, our new knowledge exchange and knowledge creation efforts can really gain traction.
Thanks very much, Justin. Rachel, anything to add?
There's probably not a lot to add, Justin, because you've nailed it there, I think. I think the only other thing I would say is that this is about a way of working. It doesn't replace things, it's about adding value. I think trust is absolutely key. I think open dialogue is absolutely key. And I think it's only through those very honest and candid conversations that are grounded in trust that we can actually produce something that adds value. Got nothing to be afraid of. It's just about adding value.
Great point, Rachel. Thank you for that. Sabesh.
Yeah. Again, I will highlight the importance of net zero here again, and the great work that is being already carried out in DMU in different faculties. So again, there is nothing perhaps new about net zero related activities. What it will facilitate is collaboration, interaction, and further strengthening of the activities that are ongoing, and then coming up with niche areas where DMU can excel, create impact, and show that, okay, it can be a leader in those areas. And already there are various areas where DMU is taking those steps. And with the support of this net zero thematic area and the possibilities of working together, we could make an impact, and hope that this would lead to the agenda of leaving no one behind.
Thanks very much, Sabesh. Raghu.
Well, I think interdisciplinarity already been mentioned, but I think it is not just interdisciplinarity. It's actually how innovative that interdisciplinarity is. And I think it's how you actually bring together the various elements and the various themes, and how we can actually work together in telling a new story. And I think research councils and also many of the partners are actually interested in hearing new stories tell creatively. And I think that's where the collaboration comes in from the various teams and colleagues and institutes, as how we actually work together collectively in telling that story. And I think we need to have the best story to be told. And I think that's what the research councils and funding agencies are actually much more interested in. So I think from a lifelong well-being perspective, and I think we need to look at stories that actually matters to our own local area, and how we work with health and social care partners, and how important it actually might be in relation to creating an impact and policy changes that actually matters to all people around in the UK in terms of the diversity and inclusion agenda. So I think the three key areas that, coming from a very much of an interdisciplinary background, the three key terms I think that might be attractive here is actually what I believe in is actually imagination, innovation, and impact. And I think that is what we believe in to actually move forward.
Thanks very much, Raghu. Kenneth.
Thank you. I'm not sure what I can add to what colleagues have already said, because that was pretty comprehensive. I would just say that the themes, I think, offer great opportunities for collaboration, for creating greater synergies across the faculties and across the university. And of course, that will help us in our role. And our role is essentially to be that of facilitators. As others have mentioned, we're not trying to be too prescriptive here. We're trying to capitalize and maximize the undoubted potential that there is in the university, and capitalize on some of the wonderful research that already exists. In my short time as theme director, I've only been in the post since the end of November, and it's opened up a whole world of possibilities. I've seen what's going on across the university. I've seen some of the research that I was previously unaware of, and by being able to take that overview in different faculties and see the potential areas for synergies has been really, really exciting. And I think as this evolves, and as Heather rightly said earlier on, we're at quite an early stage here, and the themes themselves will evolve over time. I'm very excited as theme director to see what can be achieved.
Thanks, Kenneth. And last but not least, Gabriel.
Thanks. I want to address my final remarks to people who perhaps hear the word interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity and inwardly groan, because there's many fields where you're not trained in this. I mean, my PhD was utterly isolated. Sitting with a large pile of books and getting to the bottom of certain questions on my own was the PhD training. I found later, having started my career, that talking to other people and working with other people can be very fruitful, and it's amazing what one learns. And the principle is summed up by that old expression, 1 + 1 = 3, that the sum is greater than the parts. That is true. I have found that, and I encourage people who inwardly groan because that's not how they think of their research developing, to dip their toe into working with other people. But I want to reassure them that there is still place and space for lone working. There are things that need to be done just by one person getting to the bottom of it. You know, you may want to finish your book on the economy of Ghana. You may want to write that piece of code that you think only you can write. That is still to be valued. That is still excellent work judged by external standards. This isn't to replace all of that. This is to try and show people that if they want to, there are other things that can be done, and that the social aspects, the interactive aspects, the working with others turns out to be a great pleasure, and that we're at a very lucky time when actually universities and funding bodies are observing that, and that finding that groups of people do actually add up to more than just their parts. And it can, I would say, that isolation that researchers sometimes feel, that actually there's an inherent benefit in working with other people, just because you sometimes need another person to run your ideas past. So that collaborative aspect is just good in itself if you want to try it.
Great, thank you very much, and wise words there from our theme directors. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for spending time with us today and answering questions so fully. And thank you very much, colleagues, for joining the conversation this afternoon. It's been really enjoyable, and I think we've had some great questions. I think the final slide, the going out slide, if you like, is going to highlight the future events, because we've already got events set up for all of the themes, roundtable events, conferences, and it's really important for you to engage with those. We're really looking forward to seeing you at those events over the coming months. Thank you all very much indeed.